How does butter in our food gets digested and absorbed in the body? So far we learned about protein digestion, carbohydrate digestion. Now let us learn about how the fats get digested. So butter is nothing but a fat. So how does fat in our food gets digested? Not only digested, how they are absorbed in the body. So butter, which is a fat product, it gets digested in the small intestine. So the digestion of the fat occurs in the small intestine, and previously we learned how bile juice is important for the digestion of the fats. So the bile juice contains bile salts. These are produced by the liver. So here we can see the bile salts. The bile salts act upon the larger fat globules, breaks them into smaller fat globules. So this process is called as emulsification. So this emulsification increases the surface area for the action of the lipase. So when the bile salts acts upon the larger fat globules and converts into smaller globules, they are nothing but increasing the surface area for the action of the lipase. And this process is called emulsification. And once the fat gets emulsified, now the role of the enzymes starts. So the lipase are produced by the pancreas, and this lipase is called pancreatic lipase. They are present in the pancreatic juice. Along with that, even the intestine, the small intestine juice also produces the lipase. They are called as intestinal lipase. Now both act upon the emulsified fat and break them into triglycerides, then into diglycerides, then into monoglycerides, and ultimately glycerols. So the monomers of the fats are fatty acid and glycerol. So each one will be having triglycerides. That means three fatty acids will be present, 3 glycerols will be present. So first it breaks into triglycerides. The pancreatic lipase acts upon the fats and breaks them to triglycerides, and then it breaks them into diglycerides, and then the next step, a monoglyceride will be formed. Now this monoglyceride will be further broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. These are the simplest unit monomers of the fat. So for this digestion, pancreatic lipase and intestinal lipase are required, and before that the fat should be emulsified by the bile juice, because to increase the surface area so that the pancreatic lipase and intestinal lipase can act upon. Now once the fat is being digested and it is reduced to its simpler form, that is fatty acids and glycerol, the next step comes, that is the transportation of this fatty acids and glycerols, and it should be supplied to the various parts of the body. And for this transportation, a special technique is required, because fatty acids and glycerols, they are insoluble in water. Like the proteins and carbohydrates, they are soluble in water and it is easily carried by the blood vessels. But since fatty acids and glycerols, they are insoluble in water, they cannot be directly absorbed by the blood. So from the wall of the intestine, it should be taken up by the blood. Since it is insoluble in water, the blood vessels fails to absorb them. So these fatty acids and glycerols are transported into the lymphatic vessels, lymph vessels present in the villi, and this is done in 2 stages. So in the first stage, the fatty acids and glycerols are incorporated into small droplets called micelles. So these micelles contains fatty acids and glycerols. They are reformed into small microscopic particles where each triglycerides will be coated with the protein. It will have a protein coat, protein cover, and this protein cover is called chylomicrons. So here what has happened? The digested fatty acid and glycerols are first converted into small droplets called micelles, and then they are coated with the chylomicrons, that is protein covering. Once they are covered with the proteins, so these protein coated chylomicrons and can be transported or can be absorbed by the lymphatic vessels. They first enter into the lymph vessels, and from the villi through the lymphatic vessels the chylomicrons are taken, and finally it will be released into the bloodstream. So the lymphatic vessels absorb them and it is carried to the tissues in the extracellular fluid, and from there they enter into the bloodstream, and once they enter into the bloodstream they are transported to the every part of the body, that is each and every part of the cells. So this is how the food gets digested, that is the fats gets digested and absorbed. So first emulsification takes place. The fat can be acted by the pancreatic and intestinal lipase. Once they are converted into fatty acid and glycerol, they are first converted into small droplets called micelles, and then they are coated with a protein cover called chylomicrons. So these chylomicrons enters into the lymphatic vessels. From there it is taken into the tissues, and from there it enters into the blood vessels, and once they enter into the bloodstream they are transported to the every part of the body, that is each and every part of the cells.